welcome back to Grace for Her. Allow me to reintroduce myself because we were formerly known as Hannah's World, right? And so for those of you who have been following along since my first launch of the episode, which was September 30th, 2020, here we are 4 years later, relaunching as Grace for Her. Just want to let you know, how did that all become? For those who have been listening, you might have remembered me talk or tell a story about how back in 2018, God said to me, like, Hannah, your name means grace, but you don't give yourself any. And so since that time, I have been doing my best to practice applying grace to myself. I'm not always successful, you guys, but I am reminded of what he told me back then that helps me to keep going forward. And so when it got to the point of relaunching Hannah's World, Grace for Her just seems so befitting of a name, because I want to share with other people to have grace for themselves. And what turned out was initially supposed to be like just a small break. I think I was planning on just taking the summer off. Ended up turning into a whole year and 5 months between relaunching this podcast. And you know, sometimes when you are trying to redo something and start over, there's so many reasons as to why you haven't started. Like, you know, for me, it was trying to get everything perfect, trying to get everything right. And I realized those were just excuses that were stopping me from moving forward. And hence what was supposed to initially be like 2 months turned into a year and 5 months. But here I am. I'm not letting anything stop me. I'm like, girl, set up the stuff, have your husband help you, and get behind this mic and in front of this camera and tell people what's been going on. I haven't said it yet, but if you clicked on here, you saw that today's episode is called Grace for Starting Over. And that's exactly what I'm doing with this podcast. And that is what it feels like my family is doing as a whole, because we recently moved and we are now in the beautiful state of Georgia. I am learning how to become a Georgia peach, formerly an orange. I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but it's a work in progress. And hence why you see I'm sitting in, I guess this is called a beach chair. I don't know. But it's because I'm not letting the fact that we are currently still without our furniture stop me. And so I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about having the grace to start over, because sometimes starting over can feel like failure. Starting over can feel like a mistake. And are you doing the right thing? And do you have the grace to start over? Because that's what it's like for me. These are the thoughts that I am feeling in my head, or thinking rather, in regards to coming up here. Because one, it's hard to move away from something that is familiar and comfortable, right? Central Florida has been my home for the past 18 years. That's a long time. That's a long time. That is where my family started. That's where Anthony and I got married, where we began our family. We have our 2 kids. All they know is Central Florida. And so now, for all of us in our individual lives, we are learning to adjust to a new environment and to everything that's happening. For me in particular, I will be starting a new job after 4 years of working from home, the last 2 years working for myself. And that feels different. You know, I'm about to be the new kid on the block again. And I'm a little nervous about it. I'm also excited about it, because I just believe that God has something for me to see on the other side, and I just have to be willing to see it. And that's one of the things that I have been learning in this transition, is the willingness to just step out. A friend of mine sent me this devotion that was based out of the book of Hebrews 11. And if you're not familiar with Hebrews 11 is basically like the Faith Hall of Fame. That's where the Bible talks about all of the believers of faith and how they stepped out on faith, right? And so this author was talking about how when you walk with God, you start first, the biblical definition of faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And so he goes on to say that as you walk with God, believing in that biblical principle and foundation, you start to develop your own definitions of faith. And one of the definitions that he gave that stuck with me so much was faith is the willingness to look foolish. And that stuck out to me so much because this whole move looked foolish to me. Because at the time, before we actually moved up here, we didn't have a move date. Neither of us had a job lined up here in Georgia. And we just didn't know. There was a lot of unknowns about this. We just knew that it was time to go. And that can look very scary. That can feel very unsure. But I mean, if anything is certain, then what do you need faith for, right? And I remember, in talking with friends, and again, sometimes when we're talking with people, we can project our own thoughts or feelings onto others. And so as I'm talking with friends and I'm telling them, or they're asking me, well, when's the move date? What jobs do you guys have lined up? Did you apply for anything yet? Do you know where you're moving to? And all of my responses was, I don't know, just out here trusting God. And it started to sound so crazy to me that I was like, I know my friends think this is crazy too. Like, girl, all right, I'm trusting him with you, And then I was talking to this one friend and he said to me, he was like, Hannah, who's your audience? Because when you tell me that, I don't think you're crazy. I think that you're trusting God and that he's guiding you. And he was also saying, I don't know if it's just because that's what I do too, or the fact that he has a military background. And he was saying, because you would walk up into somebody's house on base and see that they got boxes packed up, and it was just the norm, because when you are given orders, you just follow them. And when he said that freed me, because I knew that we had been given orders. I knew that God was telling us that it was time to go. He had been telling us this from the beginning of the year. We just didn't know where or when, and sometimes when you are given orders, you just got to you got to follow them. And so I started to pack up my house, still not having a move-in date, still not having an address of where we were moving to, not having any jobs lined up or anything. Literally, we have been here, I think now for 2 months in Georgia, and neither Anthony or myself have started working. I've been given a job offer. And I just recently filled out my new hire paperwork. But as far as actually starting my first day, that has not taken place yet. Have not received my first paycheck yet. Okay. So when people say that God will provide where he guides, I am a living testament of that, because God has been providing for us every step of the way. And when I kid you not, I don't want it to seem as if I'm saying this and I'm just, I got faith and I'm believing. No, I'm sharing this because there are times that the wind and the rain and the storm and the waves, we out here walking on water, just like Peter did when Jesus told him to come out the boat. Peter had enough faith to step outside and walk on water. Jesus wasn't the only one who walked on water. Peter did too. And what happened with Peter was that when he saw the wind and the wave, his faith got shaken and he started to doubt. And that's when he started to sink, when he took his eyes off of Jesus. And so I feel Peter, because there are times that we are out here walking on this water that I feel the wind. I can see the waves coming my way. I feel the rain. I can hear the thunder. I see the lightning. And it shakes me. I'm not going to lie to you guys. There are times that I am shaking and I'm like, oh, Lord, I don't know what you're doing in this season. But I'm just being honest with you about how I feel. And how I feel is like, I don't see how it's going to happen, but I trust you. And not even and I trust you. Because like, I don't want to negate or to invalidate how I feel, because feelings are real. God gave them to us for a purpose. Our feelings are just not supposed to control our thoughts. They're not supposed to control our actions, but they are a way to let us know that we're human, and they are a way to let us know that we are only strong when we are first weak. See, when scripture tells us it's when we're weak that we are strong, it's when we're weak that God is strong, it's because it's when we acknowledge and recognize, I can't do this in my own strength. I can't do this on my own. I have to rely on you, God. I have to depend on you. And it's sometimes when we get to those places of dependency, when we really see like, oh snap, I can't do this by myself, that we call on God. And so we don't have to wait till we get to that point of desperation. I mean, sometimes getting to a place of desperation is good, because then you're like, okay, I'm really seeking him. But why do we always have to wait till we get there? Why do we have to wait till things get really bad before we call on God, to the point where we're like, I can't take it anymore. Okay, God, now I want your help. God is like, I'm here. I've been here the whole entire time, waiting for you to cry out to me, waiting for you to reach out and ask me for my help, because I already knew you couldn't do it by yourself. But I've been here. I could have given you peace. And that is what I have been learning to embrace more in this season that my family and I are in. And that's God's peace. Because when those winds and those rains come, I'm like, okay, I see them. And I know Hannah, I know Anthony, I know my children, I know we cannot do anything about it. So God, while you have us out here, while we're trusting you, I also want to accept your peace. I also want to embrace that. I want to be able to walk through this in peace, and that is what I have. So in those moments, I stop and I reflect on the goodness of God and what he has already done, how he's been sustaining us, not just in these past 2 months, but has been sustaining us all of our lives, and how I've seen him do it time and time again. It's like that song, I think it's Todd Galbraith in Maverick City that they have out, where it's failing me right now what the name of the song is, but in the song, Todd says how I seen it for myself, like I've seen it for myself. Like, it's great to hear the testimonies of other people and to use that as encouragement. But when you can encourage yourself to say, I've seen it for myself, I've seen you do it for myself, it stretches your faith. Thank you. It's called He Won't Fail, because I do want y'all to know what the name of the song is, so that you can go out and listen to it, so it can be an encouragement to you. But he won't fail. He won't fail, right? That's the thing. When you're starting over, even though it feels like, man, I really gotta start this from scratch. Like, here it is. I'm in this new state, this new city. I don't know anybody. It's not complete starting over, because I do have some family here. I have an aunt and an uncle. Anthony's aunt and cousins are here. We do know of one friend who moved here years ago who happens to live in the same city as us. So there are some people that we know, but it's like, the tribe that we created in Central Florida, we don't have that tribe here. Now, they're still supportive, and they call and they check on us and everything, but how many of y'all know how it feels to be able to call your friend up on the phone and be like, hey, can we just meet up at Starbucks, or let's just go hang out or something, so it's starting over with that. Even for Skyland, she is in middle school and she's in her last year of middle school, and here it is, she had to do 8th grade with a whole new group of students and kids, and she had to open herself up to making new friends and step out of her comfort zone, step out of her shell to talk to people and be able to make these new connections so that she doesn't have to do 8th grade alone on her own. Even for AJ, you know, it's more difficult for him because he's a virtual student, and so he's not in class making new friends. He has to make friends outside of there. And so that's even on Anthony and myself for us to get tapped into the community to find out what, you know, recreational activities he can get involved in where there's other kids his age so that he can meet with them. So it's starting that all over again, and it can seem daunting. It can seem overwhelming at times because you don't know where to start or where to look or where to turn, and that's when you have to ask questions. And I think asking questions puts us in such a vulnerable state because there's pride, right? Pride stems up and it's like, well, I don't want to have to ask anybody questions. I don't want to have to reach out and let somebody know I need help. But we do need it. We need each other, and we have to be willing to be vulnerable, to have the grace for vulnerability, have the grace for showing that we are in need, because again, where God guides, he will provide, but he still looks for our participation, right? He's like, I have the provision. Here it is. The provision is waiting for you. It's right here. But if you don't open your mouth, if you don't let somebody know you're in need of that, it's just going to sit. And then you're like, well, God, where it is. It's like that story. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it before, but it's the guy who is in the middle of the ocean. I think his boat stalls or something like that. And so another boat comes by. He's believing in faith now, and he's believing that, you know, God is going to save him and going to rescue him. But his thought was so literal that even when a ship came and said, hey, we'll, you know, throw you over a lifesaver and pull you up, he was like, no, God's got me. Then a helicopter came by. Hey, we're lowering down a ladder. Just grab hold of it and we'll pull you up. He's like, no, God's got me. Even another small boat came by. Hey, you can join us. We'll take you back to shore. Oh, no, God's got me. And then all of a sudden, his boat sank. And when he got to heaven, he was upset. He was like, God, I was believing and waiting for you to come and save me. Why didn't you save me? God was like, I sent you a ship, I sent you a helicopter, and I sent you another boat. You refused, so I figured you were ready to come see me. It's like we are so stuck on how we think God is going to show up in our lives and is going to answer our prayers that we miss how he actually does it. There's a lot of answered prayers that we already have in our life that we are overlooking because we are waiting for it to come a certain way. And God is just like, why are you limiting me to your thoughts? I've already said in my word that your thoughts are not my thoughts and your ways are not my ways. The way I'm going to do something is different. He even said it in Isaiah, see, I'm doing a new thing. Do you not see it? Forget about the former. Don't worry about that. Focus on what I'm telling you now, what I'm doing now. Like, it reminds me of the story of Moses when Moses hit the rock. The first time God told Moses to provide water to the children of Israel, God told Moses to strike the rock. So Moses struck the rock with his rod and out came water. But the second time, God told Moses to speak to the rock. It was different. But Moses was so caught up in how he felt because he himself was frustrated with the children of Israel and their rebelliousness. He was so frustrated that he didn't obey what God told him to do. And he was like, well, I've struck it before. I'm going to strike it again and the same thing's going to happen. And that's not what happened. Like, yes, water came out of the rock, but God was upset because he didn't obey him. And Moses ended up forfeiting his opportunity to walk into the promised land. How many of us are so stuck on how God told us to do something the last time that we're still trying to use that same method now, and we're missing out on the new instruction that he's giving us, and it's causing us to forfeit the provisions that he has. Starting over does not have to be so frustrating. Starting over does not have to be such a daunting task, because it's a part of what God is doing in our lives. God wants us to forget the former things, and he wants us to focus on what he's doing now. Sometimes we have to grieve and mourn what we once had, and understand that it's not really a loss, but it's a lesson. There are things that we can learn from that. There's things that we can learn from the grieving process. I'll share another thing with you. I so badly wanted to be at the Women Evolve conference this year. I went to it last year and had an amazing experience. It was even a mother-daughter trip that I did with Skyland and a couple of my friends and their daughters. And it was such an amazing experience that I went ahead and I bought my ticket from last year. And I even was so excited when I was telling another friend about it that I was just moved to gifting her a ticket as well. And so anyways, this year comes around, and the initial dates of the conference at first was, I think, supposed to be the 14th through the 16th. And I was like, okay, this is great. And then it got moved to, I think, the 26th through the 28th. And my son had something happening on the 27th at the time. And I was like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to go. I'm going to have to sell my ticket. And so it wasn't until maybe about a month ago that the event that my son had happening on the 27th, they moved that up to the 20th. And I was like, oh, now I can go. But at this point, I ain't booked no hotel. I ain't booked no flight. I hadn't even bought Skylar her Girl Evolve ticket because it wasn't available last year when I bought my ticket. I think the Girl Evolve tickets didn't become available until like June. And so, but in June, I wasn't planning on going anymore because I had something else. Anyway, long story short, there was nothing other than the cost of everything, booking at the last minute, that was stopping me, because now that Skyland's here in Georgia, she's actually on fall break. My start date for my new job got pushed back. So availability was there for us to go. The only thing that was stopping was the last minute cost, because I think the flight alone for both Skyland and I to go was going to cost like $1,000, little over $1,000. I think the last time I checked, it was going to run us about $1,400. I was like, okay, no. With our situation right now, where at this point we still got to move our furniture up here and all these things, like I did not think that was a economically feasible idea for us. And so I was crushed, y'all. I was like, God, this does not make sense to me. It does not make sense that I had a ticket to go. I ended up selling the ticket, had a ticket to go, and here it is that I have the availability. Skyland has the availability. What is this? This does not make sense to me. But the one thing that I did know is that I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And God works every situation for our good and for his glory. And so I didn't know what the reason was. I didn't understand it, but I was upset. And so this morning I was having a moment, because I'm looking on the app and I'm seeing everybody posting their pictures and, talking about what a great time they're having. And then I'm on Instagram and I'm seeing everybody's stories and I'm just over here feeling bad. And so Anthony came up to me and he was like, Hannah, the reason why God had you miss it this year is because you're already full. He was like, you are already full with information that you have to pour out and give to other women, that God needed you to be here so that you can do that. So he said that to me. And then one of my friends who was at the conference this year, she ended up poloing me this morning, and she was telling me about just the experiences that she was having. And she was telling me about Pastor Sarah's message from last night, which was, and I don't want to call it the wrong thing, but I think it's called Increase in Disguise. And it just so happened that right when she was poloing me, I was just finishing the reel that Woman Evolve posted of a segment of Pastor Sarah's message. And she was saying how the woman who's sitting next beside you is there strategically, like God placed her there because there's some faith that she can pour into you. There's something that she could pour out. Like, it was just so timely and confirming to what Anthony was just saying to me that morning. And then to have my friend call and tell me, when I was hearing the message, I was thinking of you and thinking about how you have, sometimes you have to grieve, because I guess in Pastor Sarah, and I can't wait till they release the full message so that I can listen to it, but I guess Pastor Sarah was also talking about how sometimes you have to grieve what was or what you thought in order to realize what God has allowed happening to you. So all of that confirmation for me this morning was, I need to just set up the mic and the camera. I need to go ahead and pour out and share what it is that God has been talking to me. And I came across this scripture this morning in my devotion. It's Matthew 10:27. Let me pull it up because I don't have it memorized. And I definitely want to quote it the right way. Let me get to it real quick. Matthew 10 verse 27. And I actually want to read it in the New Living Translation. And so I'm getting to it, you guys. I'm sorry. So it says, verse 27, "What I tell you now in the darkness, shout abroad when daybreak comes. What I whisper in your ear, shout from the housetops for all to hear." And when I read that scripture this morning in my devotion, what I heard God saying to me was, Hannah, in this time of devotion that you spend with me, you're seeking me for revelations. You're seeking me for wisdom. You're seeking me for knowledge. And I'm pouring all of this into you. But I'm not pouring all of this into you just for you. I'm pouring this into you for you to shout it out and tell others and share with them. So to know that that's what came across my mind this morning during my devotion, to hear what Anthony shared with me, to hear what Pastor Sarah was saying in her reel, to hear what my friend was saying, giving me a little bit more context of the message from last night. All of these things were confirmation for me to say, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be sharing the information that God is pouring into me out to others. And it doesn't matter how it looks. Even though I don't have my furniture, I don't have the aesthetic set up right now. It doesn't matter, what it looks like. To stop comparing, Hannah, because that's what you've been doing. The reason why it's taking you so long to, relaunch Grace for Her is because you've been comparing yourself to other people and to their aesthetics and to what they're doing. And you've been afraid that what God is doing in their life, He's not going to do the same for you. He's probably not. Let me share that with you right now. Because what God does for one, He can do for another. But He's not going to do it the same way. So what it looks like in my friend's life is not how it's going to look in mine. And what it looks like in my life is not like how it's going to look in yours. But we have to be okay with how God decides to provide for us. Because when we complain about His provision, we're actually rejecting Him. We're telling Him that He doesn't know better. So this is me confessing all of the doubts and the thoughts that I've had, all the things that have stopped me. It's been me. Hannah has been stopping herself because she has felt that it had to come out a certain way. I've been reading in the book of Judges, and I came across the second judge. The first judge was Othniel. The second judge was Ehud. And I want to quickly just share what I was learning about Ehud and Judges that really spoke to me and has been speaking to me. And it's the fact that Ehud was left-handed. And here's the thing, right? We sometimes overlook the little details. We overlook what we think is insignificant. And God is like, it's the insignificant thing, it's the foolish things that y'all take for granted that I actually use. The Bible was specific in telling us that Ehud was left-handed. Why was that significant? It was significant because back in those days when they would keep weapons on them, most of them were right-handed. So of course, if you're right-handed, you're going to keep your sword on your left side because it's easier to pull it out. You're not going to try to put it on the same side that you are because it would be awkward. So when Ehud went to go and talk to the king of the Moabites, when they patted him down on his left side, because if he had any weapon in their minds, that's the side it would be on. But because he was left-handed, his knife was hidden under his clothes on his right side. So when he went back a second time, because the first time he went with the group of people and he kind of chickened out. And then when he was walking away, he was reminded and came back a second time. I'm kind of paraphrasing the whole story. But anyways, the point is when he went back a second time, they let him through. So they let him in through to the king. And Ehud told the king that he had a message for God for him. And that's when he stabbed him. And so, and then the Bible again gives us more information that you wonder, why was that important? So they described that the king was fat. And I know that's probably not politically correct to use, but I'm just saying how they say it in the Bible. He was fat. He was heavy set. So when he stabbed him, his fat hid the knife, like even the handle went through. So Ehud left, nobody thought the wiser, and he locked the door behind him. So where the king was or whatever, they had little pots where he could go to the bathroom. And so anyways, when Ehud inserted the knife or the sword inside of him, from the back, his bowels came out. So there was a stench, right? So when his servants, they came to come see about the king, they could smell what was going on. And they just thought, oh, he needs a little privacy. He's going to the bathroom. We'll come back. They didn't know that he had been stabbed. So then eventually when time went on and they didn't hear the king, they didn't see him come out, they finally went and unlocked the door, and that's when he fell over dead. I share all of that to say those little details, those little things, right? It's important because all of that was the workings of God, that God allowed that to happen. The little details, we need to ask God, what are the little details, the little significant things that you want me to see that I overlook so that I can understand what it is that you're doing in my life, so that I can understand what the assignment is. And when I talk about how God can use like unique things, these are some of the common themes that I've been hearing from the Lord recently in regards to like who you are, just how he created you. He is useful to him. It's useful to the building of his kingdom. It's useful to the building of the assignment that he has for you. The way that Ehud was, the reason why the Bible tells us he was left-handed was because him being left-handed, how he was made, how he was created, God had a purpose and a plan for his life. God always knew he was going to use Ehud as one of his judges in order to get the children of Israel back on track. How God created you, how God created me just as I am, is for somebody to hear his word. It's for somebody to receive what he has to say. It's okay if everybody doesn't accept you. You're not called to everybody. And we have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with those who may not be able to accept me as the awkward, talkative, passionate, Black woman that I am. And I got to be okay with that because this is exactly who God created me to be, how he's made me. And I have to be willing to allow him to use that for the glory of his kingdom. So yes, I'm starting over. I'm starting fresh. And I'm going to put this episode out, even though I don't know how it's going to be received, but I know it's for somebody. And I always got to think about that somebody because God left the 99 for the one. which means there is one person out there that he cares so much about to get his word, to find out who he is. He's just willing to find a vessel that's willing to go and extend a hand to them. And so I'm going to be a willing vessel, a willing participant, because in order for me to actually receive the provisions that he has for me, I have to be willing to participate and do my part. That's what faith without works is dead means. It's not that you have to help God. God doesn't need your help, but he's asking you to participate. He's asking you to actually put action upon your faith. What are you believing for? I'm believing for a lot of things right now in my life. So this podcast is me taking action to believe that what I believe God is telling me, what God wants to do in my life. Okay, God, here it is. Use it to your glory and to your kingdom and how you want to use it. All right. Well, I hope y'all got something out of today's episode. I feel like I was just like rambling on, but there's just so much that I want to share, so much that I want to pour out. But one thing that I want you to take away from today is have the grace for starting over. You already have gotten it. If God has you starting over right now in your life, it's for a reason, it's for a purpose, and it's for a season. Don't despise humble beginnings, okay? Because he has greatness in store for you. So until next time, peace out, world.